Let's jump into case study number 2. This one is for a large tech software company, and we're going to
Yep.
talk about playing some games. So the
Yes.
old gamification strategy. Take it away.
Okay, just a very brief background to give people some context. All right. So this client was continues to be, a leader in the testing equipment and computer software space. So what they wanted to do was conduct outreach to the target market and potentially drum up some new business by tapping into hot/trending topics within that specific space. So who are we talking? Who are they talking to here? Who was it that they were trying to reach out to? Engineers, right? And so whether folks know this or not, but engineers love very technical things. That's short of stating the
Yeah.
obvious. But they also love to analyze situations and start dismantling them, right? Like, because that's what they're trained to do, right? If they're working in a reactor or if they're working in a plant, they are trained to identify problems and solve them, right? So we had the idea of like, why don't we tap into what we know is that need that they have, that tendency that they have, and instead of just posting content about this topic, which they most likely will, the most likely reaction that you'll get is they'll scroll past it, right? Why don't we gamify this a little bit, right? And spin it from that angle, like, okay, let's test your knowledge on this topic by coming up with an online quiz, right? So the client had their database of contacts that they wanted to reach out to and what they called their wish list of like their 300 or 400 like ideal accounts that they wanted to tap into, right? So what we did was we came up with a creative direct mailer and an EDM, and we blasted it out saying like, hey, there's this little quiz we want you guys to take if you're interested, and if you're one of the first 10 contestants to sign in and participate, these are some of the prizes that you'll get. We also used influencers because yes, there are engineers out there that have a huge following on social media that write about this stuff, right? And obviously there was a campaign web page. So what we did then was, okay, so we did all that outreach, right? Where we made it about the target audience and saying like, okay, well, we all know you guys are smart, so let's see how well you do. And it was a really short quiz. There were only 6 questions, right? Because you want to grab their attention, you want them to take action. And if you send out a quiz with 20 or 30 questions, then they'll just drop off, right?
Yeah,
So just
sure.
make it like short and sweet, right? So we implemented that, and the response from that was fairly decent. I mean, like, let's just consider that this initiative was only run for like 4 or 5 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. So we got a total of sign up of 225 participants out of 400, of which 181 leads were generated, and out of which 15 of those were identified as on the client's wish list of the big
Okay,
fish that they
nice.
were trying to go after.
Yeah, I've really liked the, gamification
Mm.
in the form of like content, meaning like
Yes.
that is the thing. We're not just going to
Yeah.
talk about how important we are, and we're not going to get on our, you know, university professor lecture style
Yeah.
delivery.
Yeah.
So I like that strategy. I always like, and I think, as a consumer of information too, like when anyone tries to challenge me, like, well, how good are you? How,
Yeah.
can you pass this? It's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
It's a psychological thing where you're challenging someone, and that's the inherent tension that you're creating with that content is, ooh, there's a challenge that's been thrown down. Can I pass it?
Absolutely. And going back to your point, what we made sure we didn't do in this quiz was like go on about the client's products.
Yeah.
We focused on this trending topic, which yes, the client's company was involved in that, but they're not the only one. So it's a little bit more top level, right? Because I mean, people, engineers are pretty smart. They can sniff out a veiled sales pitch, right? So we tried to make sure that it wasn't about the client's company at all. It was about them.
Yeah.
Right?
So you've got like these 15 clients, potential
Mhm.
customers, right? What do
Yes.
you do next that you've got this great list? How do you follow up and ultimately try to engage them or sell them something?
Well, I mean, that part of the process was, like we saw in the back end, like, compared their details to the client's database and said, hey, this might be somebody who's a right fit for what you guys sell. And then that went to the client salespeople to follow up, right?
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. Makes
Yeah.
sense. Anything else about the case that you want to share?
It was, I think, one of these examples of company that was very predictably technical. They had very specialized like products and services. And this was a great example of a client that was willing to, that had a little bit of an appetite for risk, if I may say so, right? Because there's always a risk in putting things out there, right? But I think it was a calculated risk because it was a very small campaign. It was a short campaign to test out, to get a finger on the pulse of the market, to test things out. And it was great that the client was willing to go with us on that journey and take that risk. And it ended up actually being not just a fun, but an engaging exercise, not just for the client, but for their potential customers, right? Because one of the things, and I forgot to mention this earlier, that we noticed, from the data that was coming back, was the reason why the participation rate was so high was that people that we sent this online quiz to via DM or EDM then shared it with other engineers. Because going back to your point, they were like, hey, Jim, hey, Bob. So I got like 4 out of 6. Let's see how you do. Right.
Yep.
So we tended to get a lot of like information or data that described that kind of situation.